Everybody gets a piece, we're going mainstream. Everybody's gonna eat, we're going mainstream. All my family is sing. See you on Main Street, we're going mainstream.
From Wall Street to Melrose Avenue,
We're going mainstream.
venture capitalists to athletes to
We're going
creators
mainstream.
to the person who's collected trading cards
We're going mainstream.
in a collision of culture and finance.
We're going mainstream.
Welcome back to the Alt Goes Mainstream podcast. Alt Goes Mainstream's first sponsor is 3i Members, an investing network built on community, collaboration, and capital that was co-founded by Mark Gerson, Billy Libby, and Teddy Gold. 3i Members is a global deal network for accomplished private investors. Members uncover, share, and diligence high-quality investment opportunities in private markets. The network offers more than just investment opportunities, providing access to expert databases, legal services, international events and retreats, masterclasses, asset allocation workshops, and other resources. Today's podcast is a special show with 3i Members co-founder Mark Gerson. Mark is a serial entrepreneur who has built a number of communities that have revolved around some form of crowdsourcing. In addition to founding 3i Members, Mark founded Gerson Lehman Group, a knowledge brokerage and primary research firm that figured out how to use the power of community to serve its customers. He also founded United Hatzalah, a crowdsourced system of volunteer first response that enables Israelis to be treated within moments separating life from death following any medical trauma. He also co-founded and is the chairman of African Mission Healthcare, which enables Christian medical missionaries to provide clinical care, training, and medical infrastructure for people throughout Africa. Mark and I had a fascinating conversation about what it takes to build a thriving and engaged community, all built on the concept of crowdsourcing skills, knowledge, and networks. Mark and I discussed how he thinks about the difference between a community and a network, how networks can maintain quality as they grow, and why and how Mark built 3i Members. Thanks, Mark, for coming on the show to share your stories and wisdom.
We're going mainstream.
Mark, welcome to the Alt Goes Mainstream podcast.
Great to be here, Michael. Thank you.
Pleasure to have you on. What you've built in your career, incredibly impressive. What you're building with 3i as well in terms of creating this engaged community of investors. I'd love for you to talk about being a community builder throughout your career and what's that been like?
Well, what a nice question. Thank you. I would say every community has certain things that are distinctive about it, and then communities have something that's shared. I would say one thing that all communities, and we can distinguish between a community and what can be called a network, which is a community is a group of people who are devoted to doing things with and for each other and have some sense of affection and obligation for each other. We could talk about two communities that I've been involved with from co-founding them onto the present in very different ways. One is United Hatzalah of Israel. This is Israel's volunteer system of crowdsourced first response. It's the world's first and only system of crowdsourced first response. And the premise behind United Hatzalah, which now has 7,000 volunteers, is that if you call 911, or in this case, the Israeli equivalent of 911, when you're choking, bleeding, having a heart attack or stroke or sudden birth, you need help in 90 seconds. Those 90 seconds is often the time that separates life from death, certainly 3 minutes. And it'll take 10 minutes for an ambulance to get to you because an ambulance is too big to be fast, it'll get stuck in traffic, and it's too expensive to be ubiquitous. That's the bad news. The good news is you don't need an ambulance right away. You need a trained and equipped first responder. When you think about the community, there are really two communities within United Hatzalah rolling up into one. One community is that of volunteers. And one thing we've seen is that because the volunteers come from every segment of society, from Orthodox Jews to very secular Jews to Arab Muslims, Arab Christians, men, women, everybody, but they're all devoted to one thing, which is saving lives. And by doing so in one way, which is by getting to the person closest to them immediately in the moments that separate life from death. Because there's this central unifying characteristic, in this case, saving lives, a real community is formed among the volunteers. So it's really not what it otherwise could be, which is a discrete group of individuals performing an important task. It is that, but it's not really a discrete group. It's a community, and it's a community because it's a group of people who have come together around something. You could also say the same thing about the donors to Hatzalah. The donors to Hatzalah has become a global community, again, of people from all around the world who donate at all different levels, but who are kind of tied to each other because we all support this mission of helping people in the most vulnerable moments, which are those following a trauma that separate life from death. And then you can expand that into the commercial arena. And those same principles, broadly defined, are those that animate 3i Members.
That's incredible story in a number of regard. I want to start with United Hatzalah and how you started the organization.
Yeah, sure.
From a community building perspective, how did you think about and go about building community?
I co-founded United Hatzalah. The founder, the man whose idea it was and whose execution made it the extraordinarily effective and efficient life-saving machine that it is today, is Eli Beer. And Eli came to me with a vision, which is, he said, that people die all day, every day waiting for an ambulance. And it's unnecessary because you don't need an ambulance immediately. So it was really Eli's vision. And I was very fortunate to become his partner, really his junior partner in co-founding and then developing it over more than 20 years right now. We certainly didn't set out to make community, but the community became organic because we set out to save people's lives. We set out to save people's lives by getting to them in the moments that separate life from death following a trauma. And by getting to them, I mean having a trained and equipped first responder get to them. That was the goal, to save lives. So a community of volunteers has formed around that unifying principle. But we never said, let's make a community of rescuers. We said, let's make a group of rescuers who can save people who are choking and bleeding and having heart attacks. And then the community developed around it because people realized, without talking about it, without thinking about it, certainly without planning it, that they have a deep affection and respect for those who similarly sacrifice and similarly serve with such efficiency and effectiveness in a cause that everyone agrees is sacred, which is saving lives.
What's the balance and the magic of the balance between enabling organic community growth with, like you just say, this uniting mission or shared common belief of this is what we're passionate about and what we want to do?
There has to be a unifying principle in every highly functioning community. And that principle can be commercial, it can be religious, it can be social, it can be anything, but there's got to be a unifying principle. There's got to be something that all the members of the community are animated by and inspired by. And in United Hatzalah's case, that was saving lives. And that unifying principle created a community out of an extraordinarily diverse group of people.
You mentioned one diverse group of people organically growing this community. You've done that with United Hatzalah for 20 years. You're now building another community, 3I members. Right. You have 400 members. That's growing. How do you think about some of the lessons learned of building and growing a community and enabling it to kind of take its organic shape, but also at the same time grow it in a way that you feel is going to create value for all the members?
3I members, like United Hatzalah in a way, it's another application of crowdsourcing and a highly effective one. If United Hatzalah's premise is that life-saving first response should be crowdsourced, 3I members' vision is that one of the best applications of crowdsourcing, and maybe the best in a business context, is deal generation and deal assessment. And those two things go together. When we started 3I members, we said, where do the best deals, and by best deals, we meant opportunities that could be underwritten at a 25% plus IRR and delivered pretty much exactly as promised, no better, no worse. So where did they come from? And we said, well, they always came from somebody else, but the process of them getting from somebody else to us was really totally random, totally serendipitous. It was a function of who was thinking about us for whatever reason at the moment, or who we had seen recently, the recency bias. And we said, well, this is really no way to go about procuring the kinds of opportunities that we want to seriously consider for investment. But we said, we know where all the best investments are. They're in the portfolios of the best investors. So if we can create a community of the best investors and set up the systems and the processes to enable members of the community to share deals, identify co-investors, very importantly, identify and work with people who have highly relevant experience, expertise, rigorous thought about a specific opportunity, then everyone would have consistent access to the kinds of opportunities that we otherwise had sporadic access to, and have a built-in group of people, i.e. the community, who could help rigorously assess those opportunities and share and distribute that knowledge to everyone in the community who is at least considering it.
I think that brings us to a fascinating point, which is, how do you balance, obviously, being able to see so many different opportunities and having the knowledge of the crowd, which is a highly selected and I'm sure in many respects, highly experienced
Right.
crowd of people who understand this a certain space and can figure out and have a good judgment of what is good and what is not. With having too many people sharing inputs, and then you have some of the challenges around, are people as engaged as they should be? Are people sharing their opinions for one reason or another? How do you balance those two things?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the value of a network accrues to scale so long as all of its nodes are valuable. So eBay is more valuable when it's bigger than when it was smaller. But if there are a whole lot of frauds, that no longer applies. It's the same thing with any network, whether it's a network of things like eBay or a network which has really become a community of people like 3i members. At 3i, the idea is to grow the community by being very thoughtful about who joins the community. Everyone who joins the community is first recommended or validated by another member of the community. Second, we know they invest significantly, they invest eclectically, they're intellectually curious, which is important because the kinds of opportunities that 3i members consider are generally 25 to 40% IRR opportunities in industries that maybe no one ever thought of before, and maybe no one in any small room even knew existed before. So members got to be intellectually curious, and the members got to be nice. And by that, I mean they got to be pro-social in the sense that when another member has a need or a lead or just wants to reach out for whatever purpose, which could be anything from considering this deal myself off the platform, is there anybody who wants to take a look at it with me, to my daughter needs an internship, to I'll be in Munich next week, anyone I should have dinner with. It's very important that if a member can help, they're excited to do so. Therefore, all the members have similar characteristics, which is they all invest significantly, eclectically, are intellectually curious, and are very nice and pro-social people. And another important component of the network is no one sells anything to anybody else. We do something like 200 events a year in person, a lot more online, but in person, about 200 events a year. And it's important that when a member comes to an event, he knows that nobody has an agenda. No one's trying to sell him anything. No one wants anything from him aside from fellowship and building a relationship, which will have all kinds of social, personal, commercial, philanthropic benefits down the line, but nothing for right now.
I want to hang on that piece. I think that's a really important one, particularly when you think about the evolution of family office groups. They at times have to expand and grow, at times have to monetize in certain ways. But you're hitting on something that I think is really important when it comes to certain groups' ethos, which is not selling. How do
Yeah.
you think about that aspect of building the group, and what does that mean to the group members?
Well, we think about it first, foremost, and rigorously. Our member, he or she has got to be able to come to a dinner we have or a trip we do or whatever the event is. And again, over 200 a year now. And they've got to know that no one has an agenda, that no one's trying to sell them anything. And they got to know that with certitude. And they got to be able to depend on that. That's an expectation that they have, and that should be delivered upon accordingly without fail. And of course, it does come at the expense of growth, which is totally fine, because the member experience is everything. And we want members who join to realize that they're now in a very special community. And I think members of 3i realize that. They're in a community of people who are always there for them, even if they didn't know each other beforehand. They're in a community of people who have done all kinds of things together, including commercial, philanthropic. After October 7th, the 3i community came together and raised something like $15 million for United Hatzalah.
Wow.
And that's just the 3i community. So someone who joins should know they're in a very special community, that when they have a need or a concern or a question, the questions are anything and everything. It could be, I want to get out of this LP agreement. It would not have been on the 3i platform. I want to get out of this LP agreement that I had entered in years ago. Is there anybody who has gotten out of a similar thing? To I'm considering this mining opportunity in some country on a different continent. We want people who can help. And at this point, there will be somebody who can help with almost anything, because right now there's something like 430, 450 members. So there's going to be somebody who can help with almost everything. We want that person to raise his hand and say, I am excited to help this person with his or her issue or concern or opportunity, simply because that person's a 3i member. And one of the crucial and indispensable components of generating that community feeling is just never being sold to, is that no one has any agenda, is that this is a community of peers who are always there with and for each other.
Where my mind goes on that is this kind of engineering of serendipity. You don't want it to be structured or forced, but you want people to be able to be in positions to be able to share some of the things that you just mentioned in what you were just saying. How do you go about engineering serendipity within the group and the group members to make those kind of things happen?
I think if you just let in the right kind of people, which in our case are people who, as we said, are eclectic investors and they're very nice and pro-social people, these kinds of serendipitous encounters and opportunities just happen. Because when someone comes to an event and they know that they're going to be in a community of peers who similarly have no agenda and just want to build relationships, and who knows where those relationships are going to go? Are they going to have commercial benefits, philanthropic benefits, social benefits? Who knows? Serendipity, almost by definition, can't be manufactured, but it needs to grow organically. That's the kind of thing that happens at, I think, pretty much every 3i event. In addition to the events, though, we do about 200 plus events a year right now, but also there's all kinds of activities occurring online where if a member is working on something or just thinking about something or has a concern or an opportunity, members have become habituated, rightly, just throw it to the community. There's going to be somebody in the community who's willing, able, and capable of helping. All kinds of requests have been fulfilled. All kinds of discussions have been facilitated. All kinds of people have been helped just by being a member of the community, as both someone who gives one day and receives the next day and gets to a point where the distinction between giving and receiving is eviscerated.
It's interesting to think about what creates that trust. And the initial uniting common ground is you're all looking at investments. You're doing monthly deal calls or meetings with funds or investment opportunities that have been picked. How much does that interaction, not just between group members and fund managers or investors presenting, but also between other group members, engender the kind of trust that enables what you're referencing and what you just said around being able to talk about all these other things? But that starts with the investment process.
Yeah, exactly. So, as we said before, every community is about something. This community is about investments. Now, lots of other things happen in the community and because of the community, but the investments that get presented, it's entirely the product of what members are looking at and have worked together to surface. So we now have 430, 450 members, something in that range. And every month, approximately a quarter of the members will submit a deal for the consideration by the group. And in order for the deal to get considered, again, back to our no agenda philosophy, the member can have no economics in the deal. They have to basically say, I invested in this as an LP or as a shareholder, and it's done well for me over X amount of years for these reasons. And now it's open again. And I'm just delighted to be able to share with my fellow members of the 3i community. About a quarter of members will submit an opportunity at any given month. Then a committee of members will reduce that 110 or so to 2 to 3. The committee will pick out of that 110 which 2 to 3 they, members of the committee who are called from the network, people from all over the country, actually all over the world now, with a diverse array of industry backgrounds, they'll pick the 2 to 3 that they think will be most interesting and most potentially compelling for everyone in the membership to consider. And then at a monthly deal meeting where basically the whole membership attends, and if someone misses it, not a big deal, they get the recording 5 minutes later. But at a monthly deal meeting, those 2 to 3 opportunities will be presented. So the member who sponsored it will give the introduction. Then the source of the deal will explain for 5 to 7 minutes or so the characteristics of the deal. And then people sign up as to whether they want to attend the follow-ups or not. So every individual member fills the top of his or her funnel at that monthly deal meeting. And then to the extent he or she is interested, they come to the follow-ups, which are much longer, much more rigorous, much more engaged, where members have the benefit of having effectively an investment committee of other members. A member can say, that deal looked interesting to me. The returns look compelling. I buy the thesis. I'd like to learn more. They come to the follow-up. There'll be 50 to now like 100 people in the follow-up, 10% of whom will have made their fortune in the space or in something closely aligned to it. So everyone in the follow-up, whether they're active participants or not, either one's fine, will have basically an investment committee of their peers helping to steer them towards what each person considers is the right investment decision for him.
From that perspective, what have you seen to be the most valuable aspect of that kind of coordinated investment committee that everybody has?
I think the fact that there's no agenda, the fact that no one's trying to sell anything and that no member has economics in the deal, and also just 3I structure, what's really valuable is no one's ever trying to talk someone into something. And instead, you get really vibrant discussion. And we set up the forum to encourage this. Members will come on and say, look, I've made my fortune in this industry. And here's some really serious things that everyone should consider before they make an investment. And here's why I'm not making that investment. And we love that. And then when someone says that, another member, they'll take it as seriously as they want. But we love this back and forth where some members say why they're in, other members say why they're out. And hopefully out of this vigorous exchange comes insights and truths that will inform how each member makes his own decision.
On that point, what have been some of the most interesting areas or types of investments that the membership and community have found interesting?
I'd say every month there's something, two things really. And I know this because I'm, of course, a member and I invest prolifically on the platform myself. Every month I learn something about an aspect of the economy that I had no idea existed. And there's a really compelling investment opportunity pursuant to it. And this could be everything from music royalties to tearing down airplane engines and selling the components of them towards GP stakes in esoteric funds and 1,000 other things. One of the real joys of being a 3I member is the ability to learn about how so many people are making money in all kinds of ways that you didn't know existed. And then you're able to say, well, that's interesting. And here's how. So a couple things are interesting. One, the way that the money's being made. And then two, what's the logic of the thing? Why does that problem exist? And how does your solution work? And these are all really interesting and compelling. And I think that once someone hears of these opportunities, particularly in fellowship with other members who can shed such insight into them month after month, the educational process moves so quickly and so effectively.
I want to hone in on something you referenced, which is that you invest often on the platform. Presumably beforehand, you were investing in other ways.
Yeah.
How were you investing before you had 3I? What then led you to create 3I? And how do you invest differently now?
Before 3I, I would invest with a friend or a contact or a colleague would contact me, as they probably do, everyone who's listening right now, and they would say, here's an investment you'd consider, and either do it or not. But it was totally sporadic. It was not systematized. There was no community of people who were considering the same thing, and you could consider it in community and fellowship. It was all very individualistic and one-off, and sometimes good things came out of it, sometimes they didn't. But it wasn't a professionalized process. And that was really the insight that led to 3I, which is that identifying and assessing investments is about as important a commercial activity as there is. But the way people were doing it, including myself, was just not professional. What we said was, how can we professionalize it? And we realized that if we create a genuine community, and for a lot of members, this is that I came for the deals and I stayed for the community. We had no idea how strong the community would be, but it's become very strong. Right now, pretty much the only deals that I do are deals on the 3I platform. And that's because we have now 400 plus members, all of whom are really good and really serious investors submitting opportunities. And we have this committee of members representing such a diversity of backgrounds and geographies. And I'm not even on the committee, selecting the 2 or 3 that get presented every month. So every month there are 2 to 3 really interesting, really compelling opportunities that are these days what members want, which is some variant of non-correlated, high-yielding income streams. And every month I'm looking forward to seeing what the communities can produce and which usually 1, sometimes 2 of the 2 to 3 opportunities that I want to invest in. The deal flow has gotten so compelling that I'm basically doing all my investing right now through opportunities on the platform, just because month after month, there's just such interesting opportunities with the built-in community to help assess them. Who has the time or capital for anything else?
That's such a fascinating comment in terms of how the evolution of investing, particularly in private markets, will end up going. Do you see 3I as complementary to wealth management? Do you see it as this is how people will use wealth managers for other things and then use something like 3i for all of their private investing exposure? Will a multifamily office spawn from this? How does this evolve? And given the context of what you're saying, how do you think investing will happen in the future for the high net worth and ultra high net worth communities?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say certainly everything considered by 3i right now are private market opportunities. I think wealth managers, like anything else, the good wealth managers are ones who are really devoted to their clients. They're able to work closely with their clients to identify the specific opportunities, concerns, and idiosyncratic life circumstances that each client has, and to help them optimize their financial lives. And there's a valuable role in the economy for that. And they also do a whole variety of more tactical services. So where does 3i fit in? The wealth management industry will always have a significant multiple of the amount of customers that 3i ever has members, because we're never going to have that many members. Right now, it's a little under 500. We'll see how big it gets, but it's not going to approach wealth management scale. So where does 3i fit in? I think if someone says, oh, I'm an investor, I'm a serious investor, I really enjoy on a regular basis considering opportunities and sometimes putting capital behind my convictions. And they do that significantly. They do that regularly. They're excited by new kinds of opportunities. They understand the value that can come when a 400 plus increasing number of peers who also have good access and also have the same philosophy are producing these opportunities and helping narrow them down to the ones that get presented. That's a 3i member. But with wealth management services, they may overlap, but only in a very narrow way. And they're fundamentally different.
How do you think the evolution and growth of 3i will impact the way in which funds or companies who are looking to fundraise will change?
That's a good question. I don't think it will. The typical 3i opportunity, and I say typical because there have been variations of this, is a manager who has a niche strategy, because it's often going to be something, as we've talked about, that someone hasn't thought of before, didn't know existed before. We'll have had a 3i member investing in that manager for some period of years, and they'll bring it. Will 3i transform the way that companies raise money? No. Will 3i transform the way that funds raise money? No. What 3i wants to do, at least for now and for the foreseeable future, and of course, things can change over time, so one has to have the humility not to make too many predictions or projections. We now have a little under 500 members, growing relatively slowly and highly intelligently and really rigorously, because there's only a certain kind of person we want in. That's someone who invests significantly, eclectically, rigorously, and is really nice and pro-social. It's not going to get big enough to transform the way that companies or funds raise money.
What are some of the most valuable investing lessons you've learned from your peers sitting next to them in these investment committee meetings at 3i?
Well, one of them I'll take from the Passover Haggadah, which we will be reading at our Seders, where we have the four sons, and the fourth son is the son who's unable to ask. And there's a story about one of the great rabbis of the 19th century, Rav Levi of Berdichev, who would get very emotional at this point in the Haggadah. And someone said, well, why are you getting emotional at the son who does not know how to ask? Because you're a great rabbi. And he said, yes, but I am the son who does not know how to ask. He said, very often, the hardest thing in life is knowing what are the questions to ask. I think when 3i members look back upon their investment mistakes over the course of the long careers that every 3i member has had, it's often not asking the right question. It's not like you had the right question and came to the wrong answer. It's you never had the right question to begin with. I think one of the advantages 3i creates for its members is when you're in a room, let's say a follow-up room pursuant to a deal, you're going to see lots of members asking some really interesting questions, really important questions, probing questions, compelling questions, and questions that each individual member might not have thought about. I think by being in a community like 3i, it certainly reduces the chance that anyone is going to be the son who does not know how to ask and is going to make a bad investment for failure to ask the right question. I think the ability to ask the right question is a crucial investment discipline. It's really hard to do by oneself or alone, much easier to do in community, in fellowship, particularly when the question asking discipline and process is facilitated by a central system.
Is that something that is learned and done organically, or do you create ways in which members can learn how to ask questions in certain cases or contexts in areas they may not be as familiar with, or help people perfect that art? Because I think when it comes to investing, that is so important. Being able
Yeah.
to know what question to ask and then ask the right question, or even just ask the question.
Yes. I think it's really important to both create a culture of questioning where questions are encouraged and respected, but also you got to set up the forum for them to be asked. If people ask questions in isolation, I guess it's better than not asking questions at all, but it's hardly as effective, particularly in a business context, as asking them in community with others. And it's the questions that people hear each other asking that leads one to say, I wasn't going to ask that, but she's right. That's a really good question. And I want to hear the answer. But the person in this hypothetical, or not so hypothetical, never would have come up with it. That person would have been the son of the Seder who was unable to ask. Instead, they didn't have to ask it because their fellow member across the room, she asked it. And now they get the benefit of that question. Therefore, they're no longer effectively the one who's unable to ask.
You're bringing up a really interesting point, which is investing network versus information network. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's really a versus, because I think you get both in a community like 3i. How does one quantify the value of the information network?
It all depends on what kind of information an information network is devoted to. And there are hundreds of kinds of information network. And you could say that every community is an information network to some extent. Every church or synagogue that has bulletin boards is an information network. But a community is distinct in the sense that a community is a group of people who really get to know each other, like each other, and have some kind of affection and obligation towards each other. And that's really what 3I's become.
And there's real value in the information too. 3i being not just an investing network, it's also an information network. And there's value
Yeah.
just in learning information.
Oh,
I guess,
definitely. Yeah.
is there a way to also quantify not just how many dollars are invested, but also the amount of dollars that have been saved by not investing in an opportunity that may not have been right for that investor because they were able to learn the information through asking the right questions from either themselves or their peers around them?
Yeah, it's a terrific question. It's usually very difficult or impossible to rigorously value the absence of something. And that's really what you're getting at. I know that 3I members have, through the questions being asked, have led to lots of deals not being done, which is of huge value for 3I members. And we're very proud of that. Impossible to quantify. Similarly, if you had said after 9/11, there wouldn't be a mass scale terrorist attack in the US, you'd say, well, that's a miracle. That's wonderful, but I don't believe it. Well, there hasn't been. So why not? It must have been some great work by security professionals. Must have been. But we don't know who to give credit to. And we don't know whose work led to the prevention of what kind of damage. So it's just very hard to value preventing a bad thing from happening, even though we know it's very valuable.
It's an interesting point, because it then also comes down to, when building a community or a network, the value of that community or network. How do you think about that as you're building 3i?
We see the value of the community really all the time. We see members engaging with each other for all kinds of things, from several members, they went on a trip to, I think, Guyana together to look at an investment opportunity and ended up starting a fund together. We see other members, one person has a bank, another person has a hedge fund. The bank's doing significant loans to the hedge fund. We see all kinds of things happening philanthropically, where I gave a presentation on a passion of mine, which is ROI-based philanthropy, and talked about one of the charities I chair, which is African Mission Healthcare. We partner with Christian missionary doctors at Christian hospitals to provide care for the poor and to build infrastructure and do training and do hospital administration. And out of that came several people who've been deeply engaged in the work of African Mission Healthcare. And purely social things too have happened. The value of the community is very rich and very ripe for those who join to both give a lot and gain a lot from active participation in it.
I'd love to hear more about something that you referenced, ROI philanthropy. What do you mean by that?
I think when a lot of philanthropists give, they do so without using the discipline that they intuitively or instructively use to make the money. Everyone who's made money has thought and is thinking in terms of ROI. Everyone is thinking about how many dollars out will I get for the dollar I put in, or how many dollars out will I get for the time I put in. Yet when it comes to giving money away, disappointingly, very few people think as rigorously in terms of ROI, but it's all money. The principle of money is that the value can be measured commensurate with the inputs. It works in philanthropy every time. Every philanthropist, I think, should say there are really just three uses for philanthropy: to save lives, ameliorate pain, or generate opportunities for the poor. That's it. Anything outside those three is not really philanthropy. Yes, maybe an opera, maybe a museum, whatever. It may enjoy tax-exempt status. That is just an artifact of the tax system. It does not make it real philanthropy. Once one accepts that, then you can say, okay, how many lives can I save per dollar invested? How much pain can I ameliorate per dollar invested? And how many opportunities will I create per dollar invested? All of which are very measurable. And the two charities that I chair, United Hatzalah of Israel and African Mission Healthcare, have that discipline baked into them. United Hatzalah, we know pretty precisely how many lives we're able to save per dollar invested. And we actually think in terms of life-saving equivalent. If you value a life at 1, and then you attribute every other call at 0.15x, which is a broad way to do it, but it works because some are going to be higher than 0.15, like getting someone oxygen before they get brain damage, and some are going to be lower than 1.5. If you average it all at 1.2, saving life is 1, 0.15 is everything else. It's about $500 per life saved equivalent. And how many lives do we save? Well, we do 2,200 calls a day. 6.9% of calls to 911 are potential life-saving interventions. And let's say we save about half of them. Some people die. Some people would have lived anyway. And some people are alive only because of the fast intervention that we provided. So what does it all roll up to? $500 per life-saving equivalent. It can always be done. Whatever social problem, whether it's saving lives, ameliorating pain, or creating opportunities, whatever really motivates somebody when they want to give pursuant to it, which of course they should measure their success in terms of ROI and get involved philanthropically with the organizations that deliver the highest ROI. And if they want to commit their time to it, instill the discipline of ROI into the organization so it will be one of those that deliver a consistently and demonstrably high ROI.
How does that view of philanthropy become more widespread and popularized?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the notion's got to be socialized. I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to talk about it here. I think philanthropists, we can broadly define, some of the most generous donors to United Hatzalah and African Mission Healthcare are those who give $50. We've seen in both charities I'm involved with, African Mission Healthcare and United Hatzalah of Israel, there are people who give very significantly for them, and they make sacrificial gifts. And we honor those every bit as much as we honor the larger gifts, which are not as sacrificial. I think whenever anyone gives at any level, whether it's a smaller dollar but perhaps sacrificial gift to a larger dollar gift that can really steer the way the organization operates, people should give in accordance with ROI, and they should instill its discipline in the organization to the extent they have any influence over it.
That's a great point. Whatever someone is committing to something may be a lot for them. And
Exactly.
that extends to the philanthropic world, that extends to the LP world. I think that's actually very relevant as we get to the mainstreaming of private markets with the Wealth Channel, where there's $25,000 minimums, $100,000 minimums. That may be a lot to people who are committing that much, and treating those LPs the same as treating an institutional LP really matters.
In philanthropy, it's just so important because particularly now when it's so easy to influence other people to give generously and to give intelligently and to give rigorously, and that all rolls up into giving with ROI. That kind of instruction and education can be done by donors at all levels. Someone could say, I gave $18 to this charity, and here's why, and lay out a really elegant and rigorous ROI case. And someone could say, I gave $180 million, and here's why, and make the same rigorous case. Obviously, you can save more lives with $180 million than 18, but the ROI multiple is going to be the same.
That's a great point. I want to ask you questions on the investing side. What is your favorite or most interesting alternative investment that you've made?
I don't think I could point to one. And the reasons what we talked about before is that particularly with 3i, we're able to see such a diverse array of opportunities in every given month. I was thinking about the ones the other day that came up at the monthly deal meeting. Every month, there are things that are so interesting, compelling, and different.
That's totally fair. Well, Mark, this was a fantastic conversation
No,
on a
thank you.
number of levels. Thanks so much for coming on the Alt Goes Mainstream podcast and for the partnership with 3i.
Thank you. So great meeting in person. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Alt Goes Mainstream. I hope you enjoyed it. You can read more about alts at my Substack, altgoesmainstream.substack.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.
We're going